Chuck Hogan, you are the co-creator and executive producer of the FX show The Strain. This all started. It's based on a book series you did with Guillermo del Toro, and my first question is, how did you come to get involved with Guillermo del Toro?
How did we meet? How did we first get together?
Yeah, how did that come about?
Yeah, I think he had this. He actually had some sort of TV production deal, and this is like mid 2000s, and he was pitching this TV show about vampires, and the people who he was pitching it to, were throwing out suggestions like, could it be funny vampires, etc. And he just realized that there was no way to do that well. So someone, I don't know if it was his idea or someone else suggested to him, maybe there's a way that you can do it, and then present it to them and show them what it is and make them understand. So luckily, my agent, knew that I was primarily a crime writer, knew I had an interest in horror. So set up first he sent me this outline that Guillermo did. It was like 12-page outline. I literally got through a page and a half, and I was like, I'm totally in. I'm like vampires marching into Manhattan. Yes. So we met, had the first of many long breakfasts in our working relationship, hit it off. He outlined even more great stuff, and we started working on it, never looked back. And that was I think we first met in 2006. First book came out in 2009, and now here we are, second season of the television show. It's unbelievable.
Guillermo del Toro, of course, is an Oscar-nominated screenwriter and director. Were you familiar with his work beforehand before you got involved with him?
I was. At this time, again, in 2006, we met about 6 months before Pan's Labyrinth came out. So at the time, I knew him, but I knew him as the director of Hellboy, and I was like, awesome, this is going to be great. We can do, kind of a fun, pulpy, horror book. Could be fantastic. And then, of course, meeting him, getting to know him, and then once I saw Pan's Labyrinth, like 6 months later, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to step up my game, But it was great because it freed me, because we could do some fun comic booky kind of scares, and we could do high fable, and we can do, all sorts of different things. That's one of the great things about the horror genre, being able to do different things. And Guillermo is, he's voracious. He loves any good idea. So when I met him, he wasn't yet the Oscar-nominated Guillermo del Toro. Since then, obviously, he's gone on to bigger and better things, and will continue to do so.
But still, a very distinguished filmmaker. Still.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And just brilliant, and so well read. There's all these different things that people probably don't really know. How well versed he is, not only in horror, crime fiction. I think that's what I remember when we first met. I assumed he was looking for a horror writer, and he just said, no, Chuck, I'm actually looking for a partner in this, but I want to marry this horror idea with a crime procedural sort of way of telling it. He was a huge fan of The Wire. He watches a ton of television. So it was great. And the other thing for me was that, again, back in 2006, I thought maybe this book might become a movie someday. But from day one, he's like, no, Chuck, it's got to be a TV show. It's got to be a narrative that can evolve, and we can shed characters and gain others. And TV in 2006, I wasn't that excited about that. And here we are now, 2012, a golden age of television, with so much freedom on the show to do crazy stuff. So he somehow saw all that coming.
And that was another thing I wanted to ask you about. Is you said you were primarily someone who wrote crime fiction. You, of course, wrote the novel Prince of Thieves, I believe it was called, that got made into the movie several years later, The Town. And what was it like? What was it like shifting between those genres? Did you find it a bit more difficult, or any other different obstacles to writing for a horror genre as opposed to, a suspenseful crime fiction novel?
Yeah, no, it was actually, that's a great question. It was really freeing for me because, crime fiction, obviously, it's very reality based. And I'm someone who does a lot of research and tries to, dig deep and get into, how crimes are really pulled off, et cetera. So it's very labor intensive, very heavy, but sort of journalistic, at least on the research side. Horror, obviously, is much more speculative. You can indulge the supernatural. Guillermo was, he had the biology of these creatures, he had everything from A to Z in his head. So it was just fascinating learning about them and trying to add to their morphology. So no, it was really freeing for me. It was really an exciting way, to step out of my career and my profile as a crime writer and do something in the horror field, but not hopefully confuse my few dozen fans by becoming a horror author. At the same time, just to do something really, really different and fun, having grown up, reading Stephen King and being a huge fan of horror, movies and all that stuff.
One other thing I meant to ask you, and this is back from your answer to the first question when you were reading The Treatment, was the idea of New York you are a native of Boston, of course, the Boston area. Was the idea of New York being destroyed by vampires just something you really wanted to see happen?
No, I mean, it was actually really a challenge because I myself, if I had originated the story, I would never set anything in New York just because I'm not that familiar with it. I'm familiar with Manhattan, but I wasn't as familiar with the other boroughs. So again, it was a really good opportunity for me to use muscles that I wouldn't ordinarily use. I learned a lot about New York, in researching the book. And it was really fun. I mean, one of the cool things about writing is being able to learn new things, while you're working. I mean, that's kind of my job, is to learn new things, find an interesting way to relate that to the audience, be it a reader, a viewer, whomever. So yeah, was there a little added fun in seeing Manhattan, go down, setting a couple scenes like in Yankee Stadium while the Yankees were playing the Red Sox? Yeah, super fun. But that's just little, little touches as I work on this, long projects is something fun for me.
Well, I hope you'll notice behind me my Yankees pennant. So you are conversing with someone from the other side. So take heed on that.
I'm so used to that. Yes, I noticed it right away.
Yeah, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So I have one other question about the book before we get to the TV show, and that is, I've always been curious as to how if two people are writing a book together, how does that collaborative process work between you both as writers? Does someone take one chapter and then the other sort of gives their feedback and then you adjust and then another one does another chapter? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I assume is somewhat different in every case. I mean, I'd never collaborated with anyone, and honestly, I'd never even sort of thought, it never even occurred to me that I might write something with someone else. It seemed kind of antithetical to what I do, but Guillermo is fantastic. He's just so generous. Creatively, any good idea, throw it in. Any bad idea could lead to a good idea. So he was really welcoming. So because again, it was his original idea. As I say, he came to me with the outline, and I'm trying to add to it and trying to realize his vision there and make it kind of our vision. So the way we would do it is we would literally trade off chunks, not even chapters. I would usually write something, early, send it to him. I'd keep writing. He would work on it, send me back what he has, adding some incredibly, great stuff, some, making it that much crazier. I would work on that too, send it back. So it's just a constant back and forth. I mean, we wrote for a year without any sort of publishing contracts. It was very free flowing. We just were feeling each other out and getting the story together and making sure it worked. There was a time where he was in New Zealand, for like 2 years. So obviously it was all email, back and forth. But I mean, it really, I'm sure this is the case for everyone. It depends on who you're working with. With the right partner, I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. But we would essentially meet at the beginning of each book for breakfast for a couple of days in a row, hash it out, talk things out. I'd come up with a little treatment, we'd grow that out, and then we'd start exchanging and just have the book grow from there. So
now you said that Guillermo always had the idea that this would be something for television. And What was your, and so I was going to ask if TV was the ultimate destination, but obviously it was. What was your reaction to the idea of something that you wrote being turned into something episodic?
It was well. First of all, let me say, I mean, it was definitely when we were writing the books, it was just the books. There was no sort of looking ahead. In fact, he was adamant, and it was, I think, a great idea that we write the books, we finish the books, we publish the books, and then we, go to networks and try to place it, or try to sell it as a TV show, so that we weren't influenced by anything else going on. So the books are distinct and very separate. But as I say, going back to day one, he always saw it as a TV show. He was really interested in, I think, escaping the bounds of 120-minute film, and being able to have the story evolve in interesting ways and have characters come and go. So as I say, I wasn't that intrigued by television, back then. It was hard to picture, but I was down with anything. And then when it came time when we sold the show, I feel like it was 2000. I don't know when it was. Just a couple years ago. FX, which is great. I'm a big fan of their shows, and they've been fantastic the whole way through. So he was absolutely right. I mean, this would have made a fine movie, but we're having so much fun and doing so many different and interesting things in the TV show.
Now, one of your collaborators on the television side of this, along with you and Guillermo, as if this combo of people couldn't get any more prolific, is Carlton Cuse,
Right.
who's one of the main writers of Lost, won an Emmy for that, for as a co-producer of the show. How did Carlton Cuse come to be involved with the TV development of this?
It's funny, because Carlton and I had met on a completely different thing about a year prior to The Strain coming together. He had liked another book of mine, and we talked about maybe, was there some way to do it together, and that just didn't. We kind of talked about it and then got on to other things. And then a year later, I'm honestly not sure. I don't know exactly how it happened, but I heard that Guillermo was talking to Carlton about being on the show, and I was like, that is so great. Luckily, having met him, having known, again, he's a very generous, very creative guy who likes to teach. Who likes to, because I had never done television, so it was huge for me to get someone who was able to show me the ropes. So I was super excited, and Carlton's been great. He's added a ton to the show. He's got a genius IQ in television, and I've been so fortunate to learn a lot from both Guillermo and Carlton. At the same time, I feel like I got up to speed really quickly in television. It's been, it hasn't been like I had never been in a room full of writers breaking stories before. Really didn't know what to expect. We have great writers on the show. Everyone is fantastic. I know it sounds like I'm saying everyone is great, but everyone is great. I'm super lucky. We have a great team put together, and it starts with Guillermo and Carlton and goes all the way down.
So you said that you never really had never been when you originally wrote this weren't attracted to television. Have you ever thought that maybe you might develop your own, more projects for television?
I mean, it's definitely tempting now that I see how it's done. Now that I see how much creative control writers have in television versus movies, everything everyone says is true. It's definitely enticing, and there's so many great people who now want to work in television. It feels like more people want to work in television than movies sometimes. And I'm talking about really good actors. I'm talking about really good directors too. So there's a lot of excitement in television, and you can't help but get infected by that working in television. So you never know.
Good pun, by the way.
Thank you.
So the second season of The Strain premieres this Sunday on FX. And what can viewers expect from the second season of this show?
They can expect a lot of new stuff. I mean, I was surprised. The first season generally, encompassed the first book in the trilogy. we have things planned roughly for 5 seasons. There are only 3 books, so we knew that we would take some of book 2. I was surprised though at how much new stuff we generated and brought into it. That's one of the most fun things for me, is to go back into this world that I helped create and approach it from a different direction, and throw some different characters in. So we have some brand new, some major characters who are new. We have other incidents that are completely, new to the show from the book, and that's really exciting for me. That really energizes me, and I feel like it energizes the show too, because we get very excited about that. It's season 2, but I really think I'm calling it season 2.0, because it's not like we haven't just taken the next step. I feel like we've gone up to a new level, and I feel like that's apparent from episode 1. There's a very you've seen it. I know that, it ends with something very weird happening, and we're going to follow that through the entire season.
Yeah, are there any major diversions from the books that you have planned coming up that might shock some of the people that are familiar with the books, more familiar with the books?
Yes, there are. I mean, I obviously can't get into too much. I mean, one thing I can say, like, we really wanted to. One thing we've become really interested in, because we have the time to do it, is how New York might sort of crumble under its own weight were something like this to happen. And so to dramatize that, we have a new character who kind of rises to power in the Staten Island borough. Because it's an island, it's a little easier to fortify against vampires than other parts of New York. So this character, who's played by Samantha Mathis, she's fantastic. She's been a huge addition to the television show, but she really represents sort of we see the humans really fighting back against vampires and doing their best. When I say vampires, fighting back against the spread of this plague of Strigoi. So I think still, when I say vampires, people picture the cape, the fangs, where it's a lot more, it's a lot creepier than that, obviously. But she's been great. It's been great to explore her, her character, and again, to push back against the vampires. It's really ratchets up the conflict throughout the season.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more ingenious things about the show and the books, is that this idea, of taking the idea of vampires and taking it to a whole nother level in terms of, what these creatures are. The idea that, it's an infection that spreads through you. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And so we are an awards website, and one of the processes for the Emmys that are coming up is, if a show is nominated for a Best Series category, it has to submit several episodes that they feel demonstrate the best of their previous season. If you, what input would you say would you want? Which episodes would you submit to the judging panel? Would you like to see submitted to the judging panels if The Strain got nominated for drama series?
That is a good question, although I think I have a good answer. I mean, 3 come to mind immediately. First of all, the pilot. I mean, Guillermo and I co-wrote it. He directed it. It's not like a big television pilot. It's more like a small movie. I mean, it was just, so much goes into it, and I feel like it really sets up the series well. So that would be one. Number 2 would be episode 8. Now, I wrote it, but that's not why I'm recommending it. It was sort of basically a contained episode. It all takes place inside this convenience store, but it's a huge turning point for the characters. A lot of stuff happens, and the episode just came out really great, and I think it shows how the different things that we can do in the show, episode to episode, to keep things fresh. But there's a major character who goes away in that episode, and it just came out great. And my third choice would be, I think it's episode 10, either 9 or 10. My mind, now that we're on season 2, I'm forgetting, but it's the episode where we go kind of back in time, and we see how F's wife, that's Corey Stoll, the actor, his wife gets turned. She's played by Natalie Brown, who is so great, especially great in this episode. We go back and we see how she becomes infected, and we watch her start to turn. And it's really the first time that we see things from the infected's perspective, and I think it just came out really, really well. And of course, that leads to the last episode where she did return, and that was super dramatic too. And Corey was fantastic in that. So if I could get a fourth, it would be episode 13 for sure.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's 6 episodes are the amount you submit. So yeah, those would all be fantastic episodes. Yeah. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for talking with us again. To our viewers, Strain Season 2 premieres this Sunday on FX, and we can't thank you enough for talking to us, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks.